Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 101. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who's listened to the show over the years, who has liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment has been providing uncompromising quality for over 40 years. Samson products are long-lasting and made of the highest quality equipment on the market. Each project is built from the ground up with the ability to customize every need. The team at Samson focuses on developing the highest quality relationships with their customers, in addition to providing them unparalleled quality and every piece of equipment bearing the Samson name. Learn more about Samson's professional weight room solutions and the Samson standard at samsonequipment.com. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Cerberus is an organization that truly puts the athlete first and actively works towards providing the best quality gear at an affordable price. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus has quickly evolved into a global brand symbolizing quality and trust. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out cerberusstrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Zach Even-Esh. Zach is a sports performance coach, life coach, business consultant, gym owner, speaker, author, and family man. He is the strength coach and founder of the Underground Strength Gym. He established the gym in 2002 in his parents' garage and has seen it grown over the more than 2 decades he opened the doors to his facility. There are currently 2 underground strength gyms locations in New Jersey and over 1,000 certified underground strength coaches from around the world. Even-Esh is the current New Jersey State Director for the National High School Strength Coaches Association and has been in that position since 2021. Prior to making the full-time switch to coaching, he worked as a public school teacher for 4 years. He was a strength conditioning coach for the Rutgers University Wrestling team from 2017 to 2018, as well as the Leigh University Wrestling team from 2014 to 2015. He was a marketing coordinator for Spartan Team from 2013 to 2014 and has consulted with countless coaches, gym owners, and special operations military units throughout his career. He has also served as a consultant for adults in corporate health, wellness, and leadership, as well as a consultant for military, Naval Special Warfare, LEO, and first responders. Coach Even-Esh began sharing his content on YouTube when YouTube first came out. In addition to his large presence online, he is also the host of the Strong Life podcast, Iron Roots podcast, New Jersey High School Strength Coach podcast, and former co-host of the Spartan Up podcast, and has been featured on multiple others as an expert guest. He is the author of 3 best-selling books, including the Encyclopedia of Underground Strength Conditioning, which has been translated in numerous other languages. He has written countless ebooks, training manuals, and blogs for zachevenesh.com and the undergroundstrengthcoach.com. Strong Life is a fitting mantra because Zach Even-Esh truly lives up to it. He is the epitome of an athlete and strength advocate and an enthusiast who has been an avid lifter with dedicated time under the bar. He has had in his hand everything from bodybuilding, wrestling, training unconventionally with no equipment in various New Jersey parks, powerlifting, strongman, you name it. He continues to test himself daily, train, and find new ways to challenge himself and battle the barbell. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Zach Even-Esh. What's going on, everybody? I know I say I'm excited all the time, but today I am super stoked. I've got a long time guest that I've wanted to get on forever, and I'm beyond excited to get on Coach Zach Even-Esh. What's going on today, Coach?
What's up, my brother? Thanks for having me on. I haven't done a podcast for a bit, so when you texted me, I was like, "Let's go, let's get it done."
I'm glad you responded. I know it's getting close to the holidays. We're creeping up on 100 episodes. At this moment might be 100 right here. So I'm excited to share with everybody and with our audience and get you on today. So hey, without any further ado, like, can you give a little bit of just how you got started in the strength game and why, like, you ventured towards like a career in training, lifting, and coaching. Like not the lineage, not the background,
Yep.
everything, but why? Why was it so
Yeah.
important, and why are you still doing it now?
Well, I think your environment is crucial, and I just had this conversation with a kid at the gym. So I was just coaching at my gym, and he's like, "Man, I don't know where that bench PR came from." I was like, "Well, it was like the music was pumping. You were training with Alex. That's one of our wrestlers who's home from college. So I'm like, you had a great training partner. You're in a good mood. You've been eating a lot. Like everything just kind of lined up." And so I said, but hey, that could work against you. Like if you have a bad training partner, it could suck the life out of you. And so I grew up in a house where physical fitness was the norm. And my older brother was into, he was 2 years older than me. He was into running and bodybuilding. So he bought all those magazines. So I was reading them, soaking up all this information. And I was always, looking back to my youngest years, maybe it's because of my generation. I'm 48. As a kid, what did I watch? The Hulk, or Matt. What was the thing? Masters of the He-Man, Masters of the Universe. Everybody was jacked. I would watch Tarzan. And the Incredible Hulk was Lou Ferrigno. And so being jacked to me was normal activity. And it's so weird is that today, many teenagers, if I'm a high school strength coach, you look around, I'm like, man, how are these kids not wanting to live in the weight room? How do they not want to like get their arms stretching their shirt sleeves? And so it's what you're exposed to, what's in front of you. And then also, I think something that's very different is growing up in the 80s, there was no anti-bullying law. So you could get your ass kicked on a weekly basis after school unless you had a look that intimidated others or brought about respect. And I learned that, late eighth grade when I started lifting weights, as soon as I started building muscle, everybody in the neighborhood treated me differently. And so it took off. And then of course, that was the origin. But for strength coaching, I started living in the weight room as soon as I joined a gym in high school. I would go to the gym and do homework at the juice bar. I would bring meals there to just be there. So if I wasn't training, I was there because I just felt like I was in this uh, you know, safe haven for me. I felt like creative. I just felt alive when I was in the gym, the music, the weights clanging. I would talk to other guys about training. And so when I got into my third, I tore my ACL like around fourth, fifth year teaching. And that's when I was finishing my master's in health education. And that's when I got into strength and conditioning. And not ironically, I'm wearing an Elite FTS hoodie. Well, when I started researching Russian wrestling workouts, Russian wrestling strength, I would come across Elite FTS, Russian conjugate system. And I started going down the rabbit hole. And that's one thing about me is my work ethic is that once I start getting into something and my work ethic is connected to it, like I know I'm just like going down that rabbit hole and I'm never returning. And with coaching, at first, I think it was a bit of like a selfish endeavor because I just wanted to help people win. And I wanted to, the way I could word this best is I didn't win a lot when I was in high school because I trained the wrong way. So I took that energy and that pain and that anger and I put it into learning to become a great coach. But I was very one-sided or one focal point, which was winning titles, championships, points on the board. I wasn't in tune with how to really impact somebody's life through strength training. And I think that started to change as I matured as a young man. And, I got into strength and conditioning, by the way, Nick. I was older. I was a fifth-year teacher, although the previous 2 summers I was training people as like a quote unquote personal trainer. And in college, I was a trainer at a hospital fitness center, but I didn't know about a strength coach. I was just like personal training. But once I learned strength and conditioning methods for sports and I could help kids avoid my mistakes, that's when things took off. But when I became a dad, I believe that's when I became a better coach and started really caring about who the person is. And especially now, I'd say the past 15 years or so, you have to treat kids differently. You can't just be all about winning, although that is crucial. I mean, I'm not going to lie about that, but you have to connect with kids on a deeper level. And so my experiences in coaching continue to shape me and change me and educate me more than any books. Like right now, what do you have behind you? Are those 3-ring binders?
Oh yeah, those are chock full of either some of my old programs or some of like I got some of yours in this one. So I
Yeah,
got
baby.
I got I got I got two binders full of yours in there, but yeah, PDFs, Elite FTS ones,
Yes, I print it
531,
all
Jim
out
Welder, they're all in there. Yeah.
right now. Like behind me here, I'm surrounded by books. My desk, the books are taller than my head here. And being able to, I print out all the PDFs, by the way, just like you do. Being able to read those books, I think in those early years made you think differently. And I've had this conversation with coaches recently. As I said, I'm so glad when I came up in the internet, there wasn't social media because you had to get on the phone. You had to really respect somebody's time. You had to read, which got you to take notes, which made you think more critically about training versus, oh, I just saw this drill or this exercise on Instagram. Let me copy it. It was different, to read somebody's book, try to figure it out. All right, that doesn't make sense to me. Let me call up Coach Nick. How do I find his phone number? I gotta, everything was like digging deep. And so I started as a pure strength and conditioning coach. Then, this became more sports performance based. Then, through things that happened at my gym and experiences I've had with kids, whether I've coached at my gym or the college sector, is I became more focused. I don't want to say more focused. I became a lot more aware about making sure I'm impacting somebody's life rather than just helping them win more, because I helped a lot of kids win. But around 11 years ago, it was something like that. One of the kids I trained, who was a really successful athlete, he got murdered. And then I looked back and I remember thinking to myself, like, what did I always talk with him about? Winning and winning and getting that title and going to this college. There's nothing really that I, engaged with about how's life, what's life going on. And so, like right now, I told you I'm going to be a little bit late. We finished at 7, but athletes stayed after. One kid stays after and he talks with me about this sport and school and relationships. And I used to never get into that stuff. And maybe the timing, I wasn't ready for it. Maybe the kids I was training wasn't, but now I've learned through things like podcasting and engaging with other coaches. Coach Johnny Parker has a great quote. He says, good coaches coach weights. Great coaches coach people. And that's always something like I remind myself of it. And I still make mistakes this day. Like I'm very tough on athletes, especially if they're not performing or showing up or being consistent. To me, I tell them like, hey, out of respect for this sport that you've signed up for and this coach that has organized training for you, you need to show up, And so coaching has gotten different. I know I answered this and took it down like 50 different rabbit holes, but what started as me wanting to just help athletes win championships, now I look at a lot of different facets of where strength training can help them. My hope is that they can utilize strength as a vehicle to change their life.
No, I love that. That's great. I think that's why a lot of people got into the profession. A lot of strength coaches I've talked to, it's either that maybe they didn't have a lot of success, or they did have a lot of success and they want to continue it. Maybe they didn't get to the highest level they wanted to achieve, or they, like me, I had a lot of injuries and it kind of stifled myself. I felt like I never reached the full potential that I got to in team sports.
Yep.
So I started coaching, and then I started finding individual sports and like strength sports, which I got to continue doing, and which was just as fun, but it was cool because I got to rely on myself. I didn't have to rely on teammates all the time, but I still tried to seek out like that community, like within strongman or Highland Games, that I could still train with
Yes.
people. But that's awesome to kind of see. Like, I think most people's coaching, no, I don't know of anybody whose coaching journey starts off with, I want to impact them like in the long run. I feel like it is selfish in the beginning, and then it starts to morph along the way. And it's a perfect example when you've been in it for a long career to realize that and still understand that like winning is important. And what you did, you got into it for a specific reason. And you do have to be selfish as a coach to want to get better, to want to improve, and want to impact your athletes more and more. Otherwise, you'd probably be doing a disservice for them because you'd be focused on them so much that you would never improve.
That's right. If you want them to get better, they need to get uncomfortable. The training is going to have to be challenging. It's going to have to be tough. And what you mentioned about getting into the strength sports, what I've learned through being at a high school full time for 4 years is some of the kids are kind of dropping out of sports, but they want to continue. They've maybe been watching videos. They want to power lift, or they want to enter weightlifting. There's a strength coach at a nearby private school who does a great job with that. He's hosting powerlifting meet and USAW weightlifting meets. And I think it's awesome because some kids just don't want to compete. And I think it's a kind of a sign of the times. I'm seeing this in sports. I had this conversation with my friend earlier. The level of athletics is like very high, no middle ground, or ultra beginner. So how old are you, Nick? You look pretty young.
33 now.
Okay. So I'm 48. When I was in high school, you could you could go and basically sign up for a team. Maybe baseball would be one you couldn't because of the specialty of hand-eye coordination and throwing. But if you were an athlete, you could step on the football field for the first time, or basketball or soccer. Now, if you're a soccer player and you haven't been playing, year-round club for the past 3 to 5 years, you're way far behind. And so there's no middle ground. There's no start as a freshman. Next year I'm JV, I'm developing, and then junior, senior year I could be on varsity. Now you have freshmen on varsity. Now you have freshmen tearing ACLs and UCLs. And so, sports is just changing. And these kids that don't get into it early, I think they get discouraged because they don't understand that everything takes time. And so I like to showcase to kids, hey, here's what it takes. So there's this one freshman at my high school. He's amazing. He's very inspiring to be around. Football starts training in mid-June, right after the school year ends. Football starts training. Freshmen begin training. 70% of freshmen can't barely do one push-up. Forget about 10 push-ups, one good push-up, like 70% of them. This kid couldn't do a squat, a push-up, nothing. Well, he trains, of course, all summer with the football lifts. For me, when I trained freshmen, the summer, like 6 weeks, maybe 7, 8 weeks, is all dumbbells and body weight and sleds and carries. So it's like dumbbell squat, dumbbell bench, chest support dumbbell row, dumbbell hammer curl, dumbbell military press, push-ups, body weight lunges, squat jumps, all dumbbell body weight work. And this kid struggled. He's pretty tall, maybe like 6'2". And when you're tall and you're gaining size and gaining weight as a boy, they lose coordination. They're trying to find coordination, but they're growing. They're heavy, so body weight exercises are hard. School year starts. During lunch, he comes to the weight room every day. He eats lunch and he's in the weight room. Football season ends. He doesn't wait for the football coach to say, this is when the team begins training. He comes in during lunch, Monday through Friday. Then he comes after school, Monday through Friday. And so I joke with him. I'm like, bro, did you just do cleans and bench for the 1,000th time today? But you know what? That's about 6 months of work right now. Now he could squat deep. He could bench 95 pounds for 5 reps. When he started, he was benching a 10 on each side. He couldn't squat because his ankles and knees were caving in. Now he's doing cleans with 95 pounds, real solid technique. He could bang out push-ups. It just makes me proud. And I told him, I go, look, that's 6 months of work. Where you're going to be, 12 months from now, people aren't going to recognize you. 2 months, they don't realize the road ahead is just putting in that time, putting in the work. And so that's the tricky thing as a coach, is getting these kids to understand you got to stick this out. You have to really put in a lot of work. And so at this high school, a lot of my job, which I didn't anticipate, is constantly organizing and recruiting the kids to show up. Sometimes the coach does a great job with that. Sometimes the sport coach is very hands-off with that. Today, if kids are not, held accountable, they'll just go elsewhere. They'll go elsewhere to train without their team. And so then I come home and I train at the Underground. That's my private facility. And those kids are way different, small groups, specialized equipment, a lot of individualized attention, groups of 6 to 10 rather than groups of 40, 50, 60, 80 changes everything. And so I kind of take lessons from each thing and learn to kind of work each angle differently. Oh, how do I change things up in the group? How do I change things up at the private sector? So how do I do it at the collegiate level? So it's interesting how things have evolved for me. In the beginning, training to win. Then as the years go by and social media becomes popular and kids communicate differently, then I have to learn from Brett Bartholomew, the art of coaching, the art of communication, even the art of negotiating with sport coaches, how to work together. Things I never thought I would have to learn, because in the private sector, you're seeking me out to train. You're paying me to train. And if you don't perform and show up consistently, I remove your membership. I'm consistently in a position of power, so to speak. Whereas outside of the private sector, you're giving a little bit so you could take a little bit. It's not all the way you want it to be. So it's been really interesting. I've experienced, my younger years working in a hospital fitness center, then starting my business out of my parents' house, my own house, private facilities, college. So it's been such a myriad of experiences that I try to put them together. And I'm still, strength and conditioning has advanced so much these past, I'd say 5 years, with technology and technique, that I still find that we're getting too fancy. A coach messaged me today after I posted something on Twitter, said something like, being weak is a liability. If you're in a combat sport, contact sport, you must build strength and muscle, especially high school. I said, being weak is never an advantage. And this guy messaged me. He's at a university. He said, the kids showing up as freshmen today got footwork for days, but they are severely lacking muscle and strength. Social media influence, do shit that looks cool, but it ain't cool to squat deep and heavy and to bench and clean. I mean, I don't see barely any college sectors doing things like farmer walks or med ball shouldering. It's just, it's a lot of like hammering the basics because of those large groups, but we need to build durability. And I'm feeling like the fancy stuff in the private sector and social media is screwing up what kids can become. Like we're talking about injuries earlier. That's why kids get injured. They're not durable. They're not strong. I look at my buddy Rusty Witt at Troy. They're doing split squats. They're doing cleans, squat, bench, deadlift. I mean, and they're powerful. And that stuff might not look like all this fancy flash, but I could see like the details in the squat or how the guys spot each other or how they set their back before they clean. To me, oh, that's the expert. That's the expertise in his coaching. And I think we need to get back to that at this younger level so that these athletes have strength and durability, which is massively lacking today. The amount of injuries I'm seeing is like, Nick, I've seen more injuries this past fall than in the previous 3 years combined. So I think that's a big red flag for parents and coaches to be paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's this social media craze, like obviously I haven't seen like in the 80s or 90s, like as like you were starting to get involved in the training, like growing up in that, but like this quick fix stuff, I deal with it in the college setting too. Like I want my athletes to go home and I tell them every time they go home with their packets, I want you to train with the coach that you have. If you have a high school coach, if you have a private sector coach, but here's my contact information, give it to them, and I'll talk to them about whatever's going on. But
Nice.
because you have eyes on one of my athletes and you probably have prior experience with them, like there's your immediate feedback. Go work with them, but understand that when you come back, you're going to be doing stuff with the team again. So if you do something completely contraindicatory to what we've been doing, you're going to put yourself at a disadvantage. And that's just what it is. But I'm perfectly okay with you doing what they're doing. Try to blend the two. But
Yeah.
that fancy stuff is hard to get by. And like, yeah, you're right. Coach Rusty Witt is like, there's so many finer details in the basics and
Yep.
doing those hard things. Like they're simple, not easy. And the way they set themselves up and how they execute the stuff is pretty awesome to watch. There's some coaches there's some gems in the rough around there, but it's starting to definitely get a little goofy. With going from the high school setting to the private setting, like obviously you have a lot of experience working in so many different sectors and having so much different coaching experience with like private setting, youth, college, like professional athletes, like even military as well. How do you make that mindset shift? Like working with high school athletes that you basically are having to recruit to come in and almost like beg to come in that don't really
Yes.
want to be there, and you have to try to break them into like understanding like you have to work for the development
It
versus the
has
private
been
ones where you get to control that culture.
it has been the hardest thing for me. And Ron McKeefrey told me a long time ago. I think it was after I had left Rutgers. He said, Zach, I think the toughest thing you're gonna have to learn to do if you do this is being told what to do by others. So at the high school level, I remember a track coach saying, okay, you're going to work with my throwers. They need a lot of flexibility and core strength and da 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 da, all these like fancy buzzwords. And then I get these kids that can't do a push up. And it's like, okay, so you want to do fancy stuff, but they can't do a push up. So every year or every month and every week, I learn to be a better listener to the sport coach. Tell me what you're looking to do. And then, of course, when they're in the weight room, that's when the reality sets in of like, okay, your team hasn't trained at all in the off season. You're only going to bring them to me for 3 months. I'm not going to teach them how to clean. They're just going to trap bar deadlift instead. My buddy Jesse Ackerman said, consistency precedes complexity. So if you want to learn complex movements, I need consistency first. And at the high school level, I have found that if the sport coach is involved with attendance, and puts a priority on the strength training, and the kids understand that if they don't show up, there will be repercussions, then you get more follow through, because there's no discipline that comes from the strength coach. Like, what can I do to a kid? Nothing. I could tell them that you're not working hard. It's unacceptable that you're disrupting the group, the culture, and those kids end up not coming back, which is a shame, because I think to myself, you are signed up for a sport team, whatever the sport is, which means you've signed up to get coached. So if I tell you to do something and you don't like it the way I've told you, and now it hurts your feelings and you don't come back, how can we get you better? So I've shared a story of, like, I once had to tell a kid, squat lower, squat lower, squat lower, because he insisted that, he could do the 100-pound dumbbell for 10 reps on a goblet squat, but when he went to the barbell, he couldn't get low enough. It's like, you got to go lower, squat lower. He flipped out, racked the bar, cried, left, never came back. And so, if people are always like, well, that's mean, or you should have said it different, I always say, if that was my son, I would say the same thing. My son, when he goes to his high school, they have the option to train with a strength coach during phys ed, and that's what he does. And so I'm learning to get better at communicating with kids and coaches. I'm learning, like, kind of what you were saying, you give them, and then you get to take a little bit. And sometimes it's 75% them, 25% you. Like, they might give you a workout and you're like, I don't really like this, but at least I'm going to train them and get to do it the right way. And so that is the tricky thing, Nick, is that people may have, like, lifted in college or been on a D1 sport team or a D3 or D2 team, or they may have been an outstanding athlete in the past. And so now they're going to tell you what they did for this one person, and now they want to apply it to a group, a population of kids that are very different than when they were younger. Meaning, when I was in high school, nobody could not do a push-up. Okay. Pull-ups, I don't know. I worked hard at pull-ups. By sophomore year, I could do 25 plus pull-ups. But, somebody might say, I did this in college. I'm like, okay, you did that in college. You went to a D3 or D1 team. I'm working with kids, 70% can't do one pull-up. So, instead, back in the day, I would have been like, I don't want to hear about your program. I got these kids that can't do pa, pa, pa. So now instead it's like, tell me what makes your job easier. How can I remove a headache from your life? What exercise do you believe in that I'll do? And you just learn to do it. And I'll tell you how I learned it is I had to study this stuff. I had to study Jocko Willink's leadership, Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. I had to study almost like psychological stuff. What Brett Bartholomew I mentioned earlier, he says it all the time. Communication is very complex. It's not so cut and dry, black and white, simple. It's just not. There's a lot of egos involved in sports. And I always say, I wish we could just, draw a line down the center of a piece of paper. This is good for the kids. This is bad for the kids. Anything that's bad, I don't want to do it. That's how I make my decisions. Or I say, would I do this for my own son and daughter? If the answer is no, I'm not doing that. And that was actually the first conversation I had with the coaches 4 years ago. I said, I understand some of you were doing your thing before I got here, but if you want me to train your kids, your team a certain way, and I know through experience it is dangerous and not in the best interest of the kids, I will not go down that road with you. And so I've had arguments and, poor miscommunication with people. I don't know if miscommunication, but I've had arguments with coaches because they want something. And I know from a safety standpoint and efficacy standpoint, it's not going to be good for the kids. Or I could do it for those that are consistent. And then there's plan B for the kids that are inconsistent. And if you want me to do stuff the same for the inconsistent kids, I'm not, because I'm not going to give them my attention in season for these kids who showed up the other 9 months. And so I've learned that you're not going to make everybody happy. And the thing I'll always struggle with, Nick, always is my passion and my genuine caring to do the right thing. And so what do people say to me? Stop caring so much. Who gives a shit? That's what people say. And I'm like, I give a shit. I care. I want it done the right way. And I have it's upstairs. Yes. Let's see the books I got here. I was starting to like read the books on stoicism. So I'm not so emotionally draining myself by you could care, but if you can't control the outcome, and you certainly can't control other people, you can't let that, get your emotions. And that's something that is said often to college coaches. You're going through so much emotion and hype and energy, especially if you're football, you got to shut that off. And if you're coming home to a family, you can't be that intense when you're coming home and you got like a 1-year-old daughter. She doesn't need, Coach Smith being crazy. She needs daddy. And so my wife does a great job of kind of making me better in those ways. And she's been teaching that to me for a long time because, like I said, I grew up and lived in the gym. I would do my homework in the gym. Uh, so when I'm in the gym or the weight room, I just see things in this like vacuum, so to speak. And so I'm learning to be more of like a understand humans. It's a little like, for those that are the diehards in the weight room, they will get it. And so me personally, I feel like I just need to be around elite people. And so it's very difficult for me to be around people who are just happy to be on the team. We've had kids walk through the weight room for 45 minutes and not touch a weight. And I tell them that is a disservice. That is being a bad teammate. You are a liability. Your mom and dad want me to protect you, and you not being strong puts you at danger. And as a parent, I can't allow it to happen. But kids now sign up for teams but don't want to train. Hey, it's like I say to them, I'm like, aren't you afraid to play football? You're 130 pounds. There's a guy that's 185 to 200 plus pounds trying to rip your helmet off. Does that not inspire you to be jacked? And some kids will be like, no. Like, you know why I never played football? Legit, I was scared. I saw the football players in my school. They were 220. They were jacked. They were huge. I'm like 150 pounds. Coach Wojcik is like, Zach, you should come out for football. I'm looking around these guys. I'm like, bro, these guys will destroy me. I was on the wrestling team. And by the way, you were talking about those injuries, you had, and, me too. I got injured. I trained the wrong way. No coach. This is something. Hey, buddy, I'm good. I'll eat later. Ethan, I'm on a podcast. I'll eat later. I'm good. Thank you, buddy. Love you. Bringing me the pancakes. I keep it real on the podcast, Nick. So I also had a lot of those injuries. And I think that pain, like, I don't know if that made me passionate. I was always passionate about training. I just wanted to help others avoid that pain. I think people who achieved a lot of success, I believe they have an inner peace that maybe guys like you and I don't. We always have that inner dark side still because we're still pissed off. Because now we know, oh, if I would have trained this way, or look what I could do for this kid. Imagine if I did it for myself, or you see lazy kids winning. You're like, dude, the amount of kid this guy's done in 4 years is less work than I've done in 4 days, and they're winning more. And so you have this like dark side that you have to learn to tame. But I do believe that the coaches, many coaches who had to struggle through pain and loss and injuries, I believe that they can become greater coaches because they're forced to deep dive. I mentioned the rabbit hole. They're forced to go deep and learn the intricacies of coaching. I may not be the most tech savvy guy, but I have a very good coach's eye where I could say the bar is starting to slow down. Take a 5 off on each side. Let's do that set again, but rest 3 minutes. Or somebody's asking me if they should take the weight in the squat. Well, if you're asking me, I know you're already doubting yourself. And when I was squatting and I moved into like the bodybuilding world and I learned to kind of harness the power of the mind. I never thought for an ounce, for a millisecond, I was not going to make the rep. I had a saying in my mind. I was like, I'll fucking make the rep or die. I'll die under that squat bar before I give up. That's a very different attitude than kids today. They'll squat, it'll get hard. They're like, they'll dump it. They'll bench, they'll die under the bar. Okay? Like they'll just give up. Whereas if I was struggling, I would keep pushing through, like I'd find a way. Today, they meet resistance and they're just like, even if there's no spotter. And so this mentality now has to be cultivated in this generation. And it reminds me of a great story. This is a great story. I was training in high school at the gym that was next to my first warehouse. And I was training with a guy that was older. He was in his mid-20s. And he was a former wrestler. And I don't even know what he did for work at the time. I know what he does now because I actually wound up teaching his kids when I was a teacher. And he was teaching me kind of the power of the mind about things. And I remember we were doing squats and then leg presses. And as I was doing the leg press, he was sitting on the bench, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10 feet away. And I never would just do a set and stop. I would just do a set, do forced reps, do drop sets. So I started going, gets hard, I'm struggling, and I'm like not moving the weight. I go, help me. And he's sitting on the bench. He goes, help yourself. And I was like, damn, that is the best advice ever. And so I shared that story with my athletes very often. And we say that sometimes at the gym, like, hey, man, help yourself. You want to lift heavier, help yourself. Don't wait for somebody to come and help you, spot you, and do the set. Like, get the attitude of make the rep or die. And I'll never forget that. Help yourself. He was so calm as a cucumber. I'm like, help me. Help yourself. That's what he said. Like, he believed in it. Like, he was saying, you don't need me to come over and save you. Push harder and you'll fucking make the rep. Don't give up. And, even to this day, I have that attitude, but with my 4 knee surgeries, sometimes I'm like, damn, this shit could get sketchy. Who knows what could happen, but you have to be ready to battle the weights and believe that you can't be defeated. Very important.
Yeah, that mindset seems like it's few and far between, especially it's starting to escape a lot of youth athletes. And I even see it when you get to the college sector too. Like some of these kids at universities are just trying to skate by on what they did in high school and not trying to make much development. And they're hoping that they can just get playing time based off their skill. And they start to realize that it's not the same. If you want to be successful and you want to play against some of those top teams, you have to train. And in the university world, like if you see like what's going on with all the football, like the
Oh, yeah.
reclassifications of all these schools, like it's going to get dirty. It's going to get exactly like you were talking about. There's going to be a high level, there's going to be an entry level, and then there's going to be no middle ground.
Nothing. Nick, did you see this video by like a JUCO basketball coach talking about some of the changes with the transfer portal? He did like a 5-minute video, but essentially he said, yeah, I'm not in the college world, so I didn't dig in. I didn't understand it as perfectly, so I hope I don't mess it up. But in a nutshell, he was saying, if you want to go to the college level and stay there, you need to show up elite. They're not really looking to develop. I don't want to say he didn't say they're not looking to develop you, but let's say you get to the college, the kid is not starting, struggling, and then he goes into the transfer portal. He goes into the transfer portal and nobody picks him up. The university he was trying to get out of is still on the hook for his scholarship because nobody picked him up. I think even if he removes himself from the team, I think.
I'm
And
not
so
sure.
he said,
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works, but you kids that are going into the portal, they're sitting there. Like a lot of them think they're going up,
that's right.
and they're not. Most of them are not going up. And I've seen enough players when coaches like leave and they try to jump ship too, they might get picked up if they're one of the good players, but you're making a lateral move
Correct.
or you're going down and you're going down to a lower division, maybe to be closer to home because you realize like my work ethic probably doesn't match the
Correct.
demands of what the sport requires for me to compete at this level. And I think a lot of coaches probably like over promise and under deliver, but also don't explicitly say like these are the things that you need to do. Like you get in your freshman year, you made the entry level. Like now's the hard work begins. Like you made it through the selection process. You haven't made it. You have to
I
continue to develop and work because I'm going to try to out recruit you the next year.
I just had this conversation with our baseball guys because I highlighted a kid who's a freshman who's been struggling. And today I saw him killing it, jumping over hurdles. If he was about to like fall, he landed in a nice athletic stance, sprinted out of it. And I said, listen, man, he's been struggling September, October, November. Here we are, halfway into December, 3.5 months. I said, he's still got 3.5 years. He's got four. He hasn't even had his baseball season yet. I go, but he's the perfect example of work ethic and sticking to it. And if he sticks to it, he could be a savage. But I've seen killers freshman, sophomore year, then they become bums. They just start making bad decisions, this and that. But that's what I told them is I said, if you decide to play in college, you will start all over again and it'll be struggle mode. And what you have to be understanding of is this is not a 3-month thing. This is a 12-month, 24-month, 3-year process. And maybe that just makes sense to me because as a kid joining the wrestling team, you were on varsity if you were a killer, but it went like this pretty much. Freshman year, freshman team, sophomore year, JV team, junior year, now you're on varsity. So you were more mature. You were a 16-year-old on varsity, not a 14. Well, now we have some 16-year-old sophomores. I don't know. It's like, it's very different today. And I'm sorry that like it's late and my brain kind of working in like many. What college are you at, Nick?
University of North Florida,
So what town is that or what city is that?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, okay. So that's north, right?
Yep.
Yep. Does Florida doesn't have D2, right? Just D1, D or no D3, just D1, D2, pretty
There's some
much.
D2 schools. I don't know if there's
Tampa, right?
many. Yeah, Tampa's down there. In St. Augustine, there's a big one. Flagler's another big
I've
one.
heard of that. Yep.
Yeah, there's a couple down south. I don't know how many D3s are down here necessarily, but
Not I somebody may have said there was no D3. Maybe they were wrong, but with respect to the college level, um what you said is like they go into it and they're like, oh, my work, I don't want to work this hard. That's too much for me. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who coaches at Notre Dame. Okay. I coached his son when they're here in New Jersey in the summers. And I said, Coach, is it odd? Is it normal that every time a football coach comes in to recruit a kid, they have never stopped in the weight room to ask me about, John Smith's work ethic? He said, yes, that's absolutely crazy. He's like, I always want to meet the strength coach. I want to ask about work ethic. I want to know, does this kid love the game or does he also love to prepare and do all the right things? So I've been at a high school for 4 years. Not once has a football coach stopped in to speak to me. And probably a good thing because, Joe Ken taught me something about being honest. You mentioned the military. During COVID, I was up for a job in military position. And I put he's down as a reference for me. And him and I got on the phone beforehand to discuss how am I making this decision? Is it the best decision for my family? What does the money look like? Are you ready to move and take the family? And, like a few minutes into it, Joe Ken, big house, that guy always sets you straight. He's very tough, but he's exactly who many of us actually need. He's like, listen, man, do you want this job or not? Because I'm not putting my name on the line and doing this for you, and then you don't want to do it. That's how he said it. He wasn't like, Zach, you need to think about this and consider this. He's like, listen, man, are you in or not? Because if you're not, I don't want to be involved in this being a reference. And that made me realize, like, yeah, I got to be more like cut and dry, black and white with decisions. And we've gotten away from that because that offends people. And so you mentioned work ethic. Sometimes I got to say to these kids who are going to college, I say to them, don't put me down as a reference, man. I cannot endorse your work ethic to go in college because now your name's on the line. Joe Kent told me that. He's like, dude, you can't attach your name to somebody who doesn't have the work ethic and the integrity because we all know everybody, right? It's the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon in strength and conditioning. You know somebody who knows me, who used to know me, who used to work with me, or who will work with me. Like there's always the connection. Well, your your reputation is sometimes all you have. Look at how some of these coaches now, Nick, are getting hired in sports. Like I'm like, oh man, that guy has a real good social media. He's always doing stuff. And then the school or the athletic director or the sport coach saw that and said, that's the kind of guy I want. Hey, I like Rusty. He's always doing cleans and squats, and those guys look powerful. That's what we want. Get Rusty here. I like this guy. He's loud. He's hyped up. We want that guy. Boom. They might not know anything about his training, but they know he's got the hype. And so this is kind of off, this is off on a tangent here, but had a conversation with Ron McKeefery not long ago, and it just reminded me, every strength coach should build their brand. Should have, if you don't have a podcast, you should do a Q&A on YouTube or Instagram once a week. Because unfortunately, in strength and conditioning, you never know if somebody's planning to get rid of you and hire somebody else. You just don't know. And so if you have that social media and then people know you're a quote unquote free agent, well, what is the administration going to do? What is the sport coach going to do? Google you, check you out on Instagram, check you out on Twitter. Oh, this guy's not on Twitter. This guy don't put out content. I don't even know. What does this guy do? Nobody knows. Oh, I see his videos. Oh, I see his attitude. Oh, I see how he looks. That's the look we want. He's jacked. I want a jacked guy. Yeah, he's more like tall, lean, and he's a speed guy. I want that guy. It's kind of like they're typecasting you. And so you need to put out content. When I got hired at Lehigh and Rutgers, I never applied for the job. They reached out to me. Why? YouTube videos back in the day. A lot of YouTube videos training wrestlers. Okay. So just like, I think it's important for the coaches out there listening, make sure you're putting out content. Don't ever think you're locked in anywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
In our industry, there's just no guarantee, unfortunately.
Yeah, Coach Mack, when I worked with him at Fresno State, he kind of went over that stuff with me, talking about building your brand. Obviously, like from all his experience, like being an author and having the podcast
Book is
back in the
great.
day. Yeah, like going through
Strength
all that
coach,
that
CEO.
business, yeah, that business minded side, like I didn't even think that was a thing. And like obviously, I don't think he knew it was as big as possible until social media really broke out. And obviously, like you took the reins over when YouTube first started, and you've been posting stuff. Like I'm sure you've got videos tagged from before like 2010 at this point in time.
2006 was
Yeah.
the first video. And of course, what's sad is like back then, the quality of video, like it looks like I filmed it with a calculator. That's how bad it was. So today, you have people filming and editing and really getting this whole professional quality, but don't get caught up in having to be that way. It could simply be engage on Twitter, collect questions, and then every Friday or Wednesday or whatever day you want, go on Instagram and answer those questions live. Matt Wenning does Wenning Wednesdays. And by doing so, he builds this massive following. He shares great quality content, and then he's hired to consult for the government, military. He consults, or he's like put in his gym equipment in a Ford dealer in Columbus. And so if nobody knows about you, listen, I don't like doing Instagram and all that. I want to train. I don't want my phone there. But and it stinks because my hobby is my job. It's good to have different hobbies. But if you could build the following without it, more power to you. But Ron's book, Strength Coach CEO, just the title of that book alone should really get you to understand, like, hey man, you got to be your own CEO.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's great advice for anybody too. Like I hate it with a passion. I hate posting about the podcast. Like I love doing the podcast, but everything
Yes,
after that, I'm like, I would love to just throw in the trash.
it's
I just,
probably like the athletes. They just want to play the game. But they're not a fan of all the behind the scenes, just like a Broadway play. They rehearse and practice for 6 to 12 months, and then they could step on stage. But that behind the scenes stuff is tough, and it's a necessary evil unless I could get somebody who's the expert in that area. And I've done that stuff. Like I'll have kids record things. I did TikTok for a little bit, and all I would do is give my son or daughter the phone, and I'd say, "Here, take some of these videos and do whatever you want." But you got to learn, like, hey, man, I'll stay in this lane and that lane, but you do got to put your work out there. And the podcast is great. Here's something interesting, Nick, that, we mentioned books, and I've said this. I remember saying this to Elliot Hulse long ago. I said, listen, I don't know. In the future, I don't know what's going to happen to YouTube, our YouTube videos, or our Twitter, or any of that stuff. But I do know that books have stood the test of time, right? The Bible has stood the test of time. I've got strength training books from the late 1800s. So I'm a believer in writing a book. I've written a few books. So I think that, and by the way, I have a book that's so small. I can't believe how small it is. This is one of the best powerlifters in the world, Lamar Gant. Yep, that's the encyclopedia. That's the first one. Yep.
this is number one.
Look how little this is. It's 40 something pages. And there's oh no, it's not 40. So it's not even 40. It's 30. I mean, the photos at the end. So it's 31 written pages, and then there's a few photos at the end. But it just goes to show you, okay, you could do something very small, but it's important that you got to start doing it. You got to get that book out there.
Yeah.
And they could be small. And that's not just for the business side of things, but I always say, like, my kids don't read books, right? They look at Instagram and TikTok and all that. But one day, when I'm gone, I know my kids will be like, I'm going to read dad's book. And they'll always have that. Who knows what's going to happen to the YouTube videos, where that's going to go. But it's interesting. Like, I think that, this behind the scenes work, we don't love it because we want to be on the floor coaching. I love coaching. I don't love I love a whiteboard or a chalkboard versus the computer screen up there. It's just sometimes things are part of the game, right? No offense to NSCA, but I've got my CSCS. I'm not a better coach because of it, but it is part of the game if I want to go back to college or in the military. That cert didn't make me better. I hate to admit it. Hopefully they don't hold it against me, but there are certain things we got to do that are part of the game, and that might be the communication skills we need to learn. Brett Bartholomew, I hammer that. It's important to give people credit. And even, podcasts. When I first started my podcast, I didn't even have a name for it. And I didn't even know how to get the audio out. It was a video. So technically it wasn't a podcast. It was just a video, thing like this. So, you know, interesting times. Let me ask you a question. What's like some of your favorite books you got on the shelf?
Uh, some of my favorite ones. I like I like the PDFs a lot more too. Just like going through all those. I
Which ones, like who have you printed out that you enjoy a lot?
I
What
have
coach?
like every single one from Elite FTS, like all Jim Wendler's,
Yes.
some of the other coaches that have been on there, all Todd Hammers. My buddy Andy Deck was on there for a long time. There's a few up there, all the triphasic ones, a lot of the
Yep, of
tactical
course.
training,
Yes.
um, all yours. Matt Wennings, I've got Matt Wennings everywhere
Yes.
too. Yeah,
Yes.
those are all great.
We
I'm
probably program very similarly.
I think so. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny.
a lot of strong men, get your hand in the dirt kind of stuff.
Yes, that's great. Where was Ron when he went to Florida? Was he at South Florida back in the day?
Yeah, I think that's where he started out, like pretty close around that time. That's when USF was like in its heyday, like way old. I think he said his weight room was like 1,000 or 2,000 square feet, and he was running those teams in like six different groups.
He did some very creative things to raise money. He did things like created like an alumni where they could
Yep.
have access to the gym. They bought t-shirts. Dude, you should do this, Nick. On Ron's YouTube, there's old videos from
Oh, I
USF,
know those ones. Yeah.
like the tire battle. Looks like they would like go out to like the beach and do like workouts. It was like, oh man, it was so cool to see Ron's old videos that people didn't even know about. I was going through them. I remember it was when I got hired at the high school because the weight room was such a dump. It looked like a tornado went through. So Ron had, we would, I think at the time, Ron was probably working with Play because back then we could hop on the phone more often. He was sharing all of these fundraising ideas. What about you're wearing a Samson shirt? I love to talk equipment. What equipment do you have at North Florida?
We in one of the weight rooms, it's all Sorinex, and the other weight room, it's majority hammer strength and some Intech stuff. Samson's good to me. They're one of the sponsors for the podcast.
Samson is great, although I feel like their equipment tends to be more on the West Coast because they're in New Mexico, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're a huge sponsor for tactical setting. A lot of high
Yes.
schools, a lot of West Coast, and then they're the official sponsor for the NAIA as well.
Oh, they are. And is NAI like, did it start in Florida? I feel like it's every time I hear
I
NAI,
think
it's
so.
Florida.
There's a ton of schools in Florida that are NIIA,
Yeah.
and I think most, and then a lot more in the Midwest as well. I'm not super familiar with all of them just because I played D3 and I've only been after that in Division One. So I don't even know a lot of the D2 schools or the NAIA schools, but they're kind of sprinkled around everywhere.
Where did you go to? Where did you play in
Lacrosse
college?
at Salisbury University.
Which is Pennsylvania, or
No,
no,
it's
Mass.
Eastern Shore, Maryland.
Oh, Maryland, Salisbury. Awesome. So much stuff like running through my mind as we're talking like equipment and D3 schools. NAIA, when I went to Lehigh, we had a kid come in for grad school, 5th year, who was a wrestler. And I think I'd have to look him up, but I think he was a 2-time NAIA national champ. He was very tough from like the Miami area.
Oh, really?
He was tough.
You don't find wrestlers from down south too often.
Now Florida's getting very big because, well, you've always had Brandon, Florida. Because I remember my
Okay.
younger brother wrestled at Brandon High School tournament. But one of the guys I know, he's a Jersey guy, wrestled at Iowa, then Oklahoma, then he was coaching at Lehigh. Steve Mocco, big New Jersey wrestler. He's in the Boca area. He runs a wrestling club out of American Top Team in Coconut
Oh,
Creek.
yeah. That's how it's getting bigger now.
Exactly. He's blowing it up. So I was there years ago because we go down to Florida for my daughter's tennis and my son's baseball. So I was down, my son's 15 now. I mean, I was down there 5+ years ago before COVID, so maybe longer. I mean, there was kids driving from and parents driving from over an hour to go to his wrestling club. So wrestling, because of him and like building wrestling, he's the state chairman. I don't know if he is anymore, but he was. He's getting it to change. And so those private schools down there are building sort of public schools. So it's cool to see, that's the other thing is like the power of a coach. A great coach can, if you know how to build out like what Ron did when he was at South Florida. Okay, I've got this weight room. I'm going to sell shirts to the alumni. I'm going to have an alumni group. I think, that's the epitome of strength coach CEO is the ability to turn it into a company. And that's something I'm got to get better at outside of my own business. And that's something I could have done better while I was at the college. So that's some deep, that's like taking strength coach profession deeper.
Definitely. Hey, well, I know we could go on forever, and I
We'll do
appreciate your
part
time,
two.
Coach. I know we're gonna have to do part two, but
Yeah.
to wrap up this one, just to end every good show,
Yeah.
we got a four-quarter finisher and maybe
Yes.
overtime. So we'll go
Let's go.
rapid fire so we can get you
Okay.
out of here on time. Hey, so first one I got for you, biggest influence in strength and conditioning and favorite athlete growing up.
Wow. This is going to be an interesting answer. My biggest influence in strength and conditioning may be Diamond Gym, which was the bodybuilding gym I trained out of, which I always describe as the West Side Barbell of bodybuilding. What it inspired me was the atmosphere and the culture. And I brought that, the music and the intensity. And I believe that's always been a big part of the underground strength gym. Um, there's been so many strength coaches who have influenced me. It's hard to really say this guy, that guy. Coach Ethan Reeve wrote the intro to my book. Big House has been amazing. Louis Simmons, of course. You mentioned Elite FTS, so Dave Tate and Jim Wendler. Without Elite FTS, there would be no underground strength gym. I could guarantee that. And there's many coaches like I still learn from. I'm learning from so many today. Um, I'm constantly learning. I think Donnie Thompson is very underrated as a strength coach. People know him for creating fat bells and body tempering and kind of rehab stuff. But what people forget is he's the first guy that totaled 3,000 pounds at age 45. Listen, I'm 48. When I was 45, there's no way I was in my prime. This guy breaks and sets the world record at age 45. And I think to this day, it's only him and Dave Hoff that have totaled 3,000. Well, Dave Hoff has done a little more, but his ability to be durable is amazing. And he implemented kettlebells with his powerlifting. So there's a lot of names. I'm trying to like look at books. Pavel's old books. I know I'm kind of going on a rant. The old strength and health magazines. So if people listening, I did Iron Roots videos with Play, which is like a training method or a book or a magazine that I would like highlight. So I think that's an important educational piece for coaches to look at, but I didn't mean to drag that on.
No, that's perfect. I know people got to check that out. I think you did like more than 50 episodes on that. So,
Did man, I think we did 12 episodes of like just me, the topic, and then the
okay.
next 12 I went to York Barbell and got a tour and interviewed Jan Dellinger, who Jan is the last living employee who worked with Bob Hoffman, John Grimmick. So he really had some amazing stories of the weightlifters and the strength training, the way they ate, the business side of York Barbell. It's something that really young coaches should understand because that's what paved the way for the profession. That's where equipment and strength started.
No, definitely. Yeah, I got to brush up on that too, because some of those names I'm like I can't think too much on them. So that's awesome. Hey, next one I got for you. What can you be found doing outside of the weight room walls? What are some of your hobbies that might not be training or coaching related?
Any, I call it a hobby, but like I love to go watch my kids in their sports. I don't, it breaks my heart if I miss my daughter's tennis match or my son's baseball or basketball. So to me, I love that I'm around them all the time. Now there's things that I used to do a little bit more that I got to get back to doing. Fishing and mountain biking. And so my son is into fishing. So we do go to Lake George. We rent a boat. I take it around the perimeter. He goes fishing. And a hobby I will pick up down the road, I don't know when, is learning how to weld. I think like I've lost some of the skills of my hands. When I was a kid, third grade, I could take apart my BMX bike, clean it, grease it all up, put it back together. And I feel like I got so busy with work and strength and conditioning, you become like, you can't even screw in a light bulb. I want to get back to being able to do more things with my hands, and welding is something that's on my list of things to learn.
All right, all right. Hey, so if you were not a strength coach right now, what do you think you would
God.
be doing as a profession nowadays? I know you've done teaching and you've done other
Yeah,
stuff in the past, but
that's a tough one.
current day, what do you think you'd be doing?
I would have taken this work ethic that I have, this relentless work ethic, and gone into some sort of like finance business. So, I live in a wealthy town, but then the neighboring towns, like a cheap house is $3 million, and that's like their second house. So these are people that made a lot of money on Wall Street and really put in the work. And so I had the work ethic. I just didn't have the guidance. And the truth be told is, I tell my kids, like, whatever career you're taking, you need to make a lot of money, because never would I have guessed, as like an early days teacher 20 plus years ago. I started teaching 25 years ago. Um, Teaching salaries have not changed, but the cost of living has doubled, at least, probably more. Like I used to tell kids, hey, you don't have food? Go to 7-Eleven on your bike, get a carton of eggs for 99 cents. Now eggs are 6, 7, $8. Or, hey, you bought this house for 400 grand. Now it's 700 to 800 grand. I had, my license in 1993. If you were low on money, you said, "Can I get $2?" And you'd have a quarter tank of gas for $2. Now you say, "Can I get $2 worth of gas?" You'd be like, two, it wouldn't happen. And so the truth is, I would have done something that's purely chasing the money, because I'm going to put in the work no matter what it is. And upset, no, I love what I do. And I know a lot of people that make a lot of money, they're not happy. And so it's hard to put a dollar sign on that. I'm very happy. I have a very good schedule. But I work on Sundays. You and I are working right now. It's Wednesday night at 9 p.m. So we do work, but I would have done something like in New York City financial,
All right, all right. Hey,
making money.
I know. With that work ethic, you'd be in some places for sure. Hey, so if you have an ideal training day, it's you in underground strength training gym by yourself. What's playing on the speakers and what are you having after that training session to eat?
Oh, this is a great question. I have some great playlists on Spotify. Underground Strength Gym, Underground Strength Gym 2 is a good one. It's got a mix of like rap and some hard metal, some old rap, maybe a country song here and there. Training session would, be some speed hang cleans, some safety bar squats, maybe with the Hatfield handles, um, and then like supersets from there. So like split squats, rowing, arms, just kind of like an attack circuit, very much wrestling mind type. and steak and potato afterwards. A loaded baked potato and a good steak.
All right.
That's what I love. This morning I actually had steak and eggs. Last week I actually took about 45 athletes on a field trip. I wanted to get them out of the school, and so we went to the Amish market right outside of Princeton. And then my buddy's a strength coach at Princeton University, so I went to the Amish market and I told the kids I'm going to buy raw milk, even though it's illegal because I'm a gangster. Got steak and raw milk and showed them, hey, these are the foods we want to eat, not going to the supermarket for all the hormone injected. Or, hey, you want to eat cake? You could buy it from a bakery here. Your cake is going to expire in 7 days. You could buy this other thing from the supermarket. It'll expire in 7 years. All right. That's why we're unhealthy. So went there, went to Princeton University. My buddy James DiVincenzi gave us a tour of every nook and cranny. We had sports nutrition Q&A. So, I always said like I could live off of steak, eggs, raw milk, peanut butter.
Gotta throw in peanut butter.
That's
Hey,
right.
so last one I got for you for overtime, either favorite under the bar memory or favorite coaching memory you've had so far, or
Oh yeah.
whichever one comes to mind first.
I have some great under the bar memories, and two of them have to do with squats. And so I remember, I think I wasn't 22 yet, but for some reason I wanted to squat 315 for 22 reps. I was 21. And I remember there was this hot girl at the gym, and I was like, I'm going to impress her. So she always came at the same time I did. So I was like, I wanted this. I had visualized it. So I squat 315 for 22 reps. The gym is watching me. I only weighed like 200 pounds, 198. She comes in like 15 minutes later. I'm fucking destroyed. She only got to see me do like leg curls. So I was always like, damn it, but I still got the girl for those asking. So that was a great memory. One of the toughest squats, though, was I would warm up for squatting 135 for 20, 225 for 15, 315 for 10, 405 for 5. Then I would do 455 for like a triple. And I remember 225 like feeling so light, like banging it out, that I started coming up with this idea that I think I'm going to do it for 50 reps. And so it was on my mind. And then I started like playing the movie in my head, visualizing that I could do 225 for 50 reps. And so I remember planning it out, getting my friend to be at the gym with me so he could spot me. And I think I got to like 46 or 48 reps. And then the last two or three, he just put his hands on my chest to kind of stay near me. And I did 225 for 50 consecutive reps, full range of motion, parallel, probably slightly below parallel. That was good memory. And I also remember this being pretty damn strong legs and back. I remember doing barbell rows with like 335. So I did a plate, 10 reps. And then Diamond Gym had just tons of quarters. So it was quarter, 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 quarter. And I just worked up to bent over row. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, like Dorian Yates was doing that, except he was Mr. Olympia. So I learned like I was very strong, but if I was not going to get involved with chemical warfare, I would never be, so I was lifting more weights than a lot of the pro bodybuilders. I was pretty strong legs and back. And then I have a lot of great memories of the before I had the warehouse gym, Nick, like the pre-warehouse gym era of training at playgrounds. We drive my truck, pack a sandbag or two, a prowler, a sled, 2 or 3 kettlebells, and just like destroy ourselves in the heat, walking on the parallel bars, pull-ups, kettlebell, like experimenting. Me and my buddy, we were like experimenting on ourselves of what this training could do as a combat athlete. And to me, that was perfect and beautiful because it was imperfect. It wasn't like, what's the proper warm-up? What is the optimal? It was none of that. It was just work. And I think we've really gotten away from working in strength and conditioning because we're so like, oh, is that 0.5 meters per second, change the weight. What is this? And sometimes I see that the technique of these lifts is not so good because everybody's looking at the TV monitor with the velocity, where we've kind of gotten away from work, and that work builds durability, which keeps athletes strong and healthy during the season. We've got all this fancy shit, and I'm seeing more injuries than ever before. And so I remember those days of that's what gave me that felt like we're training like gladiators outside, lifting stones, pushing trucks. It was beautiful. Perfect.
I love that. Yeah, that's that old school strongman mentality too. That's kind of how I started. I think my first training partner, he introduced me to you. I think he went to one of the first one or two certifications
What's
way
his
back.
name? Do you remember?
He's not related to me, Kevin O'Brien.
I remember Kevin from Maryland, a fireman.
Yeah. He
Yes.
was huge. He was a bodybuilder, huge guy.
Yes. He came to the first or second one. He built the equipment. He used to put it in his truck and travel. Yes, he was built. A lot of ex-bodybuilders started transitioning into that style of training. And you mentioned those early days. There was a strongman group in the Central Jersey area. They trained out of a truck stop. It was in a truck warehouse. How did they lift the Atlas stones? They lifted it on a bunch of wooden pallets piled up. Where did they farm walk? Through the warehouse. Where did they do tire flips? At the tractor tire yard. That's where we did it.
Love it.
Yeah, now everything is so perfect. I don't like that because it doesn't I believe it doesn't transfer to sport when the shit hits the fan.
No, definitely.
But I remember Kevin. He's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. I remember he would do a bunch of bodybuilding stuff. He kind of showed me how to lift back in the day. And then every once in a while he would take me. I was still in high school, and then some of the other college guys, and we'd go out. He's like, "You want to come run hills with us?" I'm like, "What?" And he'd unpack his truck. He'd have ropes and sandbags and stuff in there, and be like, "All right, it's kind of cool."
Dude, my first certifications was I don't know, I was murdering people. And it was a nonstop workout. You didn't stop training. And if you were doing an exercise, somebody was coaching you. I go, you go. Everything was hands on. I mean, they learned all the kettlebell exercises. They would coach a group. I would bring in a group of athletes, and before they would coach them, it was the second day, they'd have to get in front of the whiteboard, work together. What's the workout we're going to take everybody through? What's the regression? All right, you might have a middle school kid. Hey, you might have guys that are college football players. And those guys that they trained, we had tougher kids back then. We had very hard-nosed, blue-collared kids. And our guys loved it. It was like an experiment. And then we would stay and do a Q&A. I mean, the early certifications were the best. Even my certifications now, they're too perfect. And it's just hard to get people to travel, to show up to a seminar.
Yeah.
But I deep down believe that's what the coaches of today need. You need to get to a seminar. You need to lift. You need to get under the bar with other people. I look at some of the interns and they don't even exercise, let alone strength train. How are you going to spot a guy benching 405 if you've never even squatted it or you don't even know what it is? Yeah. And we're in a real interesting place with this industry, so to speak. So I dragged it out, dude, but I had a great time chatting with you, my man.
No, I appreciate you coming on. Where can people kind of follow along? Can you throw in your website and everything so people can, if that are under a rock, don't know where to go?
The Strong Life podcast people will enjoy. My newsletter people really enjoy. I do a short, almost daily newsletter at zachstrength.com. Free training courses there. And then Instagram. If you Google Zach Even-Esh, man, you'll end up getting directed to the YouTube and Instagram. And if you're ever what's Zach's favorite books? Search for it on my website. What's Zach, what does Zach do when he's busy? Search, minimalist training or busy man strength. What does Zach think of calisthenics? Search calisthenics on my website. I've been writing articles and things for like 20 years. It's good for people to search and pull up the old work. The old work, the grammar may not be that hot, but I feel like the information was amazing.
No, you built your brand up well, and I mean it's basically your life's journal, which is pretty cool to go back and see. But
That's
hey,
right.
we'll have to run it back sometime, Coach. But I really appreciate you coming on today. It's been awesome. So thank you
Thank you,
again.
Nick. Thank you, guys.
Talk to you soon, Coach.
Later, bro.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.